This podcast is brought to you by Shopify.
Welcome back to the AI Analysis Podcast. Today we're looking at an episode of the Part of Your Broadway World Podcast. And this was a little controversial.
Oh, yeah. What have we got?
Well, we've got a whole chunk of their show where they really went deep on the new live-action Lilo and Stitch remake.
Ah, okay. I heard that was getting some reactions.
That's one way to put it. So our goal today is basically to unpack their analysis, understand why they were so critical.
Right, because the original animated one is pretty beloved, isn't it? So a sharp contrast there.
Exactly. I listened to their discussion, and disappointment is the main theme. They actually called the remake, and this is a direct quote, a pale imitation.
Ouch. Pale imitation.
Yeah, and they felt it just totally lacked the heart and soul of the original. That feeling really comes through in everything they said.
Okay, so we're going to dig into that, like the specifics, character changes, plot stuff.
Yep, all of it. The character changes they hated, the plot points that made no sense to them, and they even connected to bigger issues they see in Hollywood right now.
Interesting. So it's more than just, this movie was bad.
Definitely. It's like using their review as a window into, maybe what's going wrong with some of these remakes.
Gotcha. Okay, let's dive in. What was their initial gut reaction, the overall vibe?
Well, right off the bat, they weren't pulling any punches. They basically said the live-action Lilo and Stitch is not great, and sometimes even just bad.
So not exactly a rave review.
Not even close. They put numbers on it, too, which helps frame it.
Mm-hmm.
They gave the original animation an 8 out of 10. Pretty high praise.
Okay, solid score for the original. And the remake.
A week 6.
Week 6. Oof, that's a noticeable drop.
Huge drop. They did say, it's not horrible, which I guess is something. But the real kicker was when they said it doesn't do anything that adds to the original.
Oh, that's a common criticism with these remakes, isn't it? If it doesn't add anything, why bother?
Precisely their point. They kept saying that any moment that actually felt good, like a funny line or whatever, was just lifted straight from the first movie.
So no new takes, no deeper exploration.
None that they could see. It felt like zero creativity went into actually building on the story.
And you said earlier they felt it actually took away from the original sometimes.
Yeah, that was the other part. Not just failing to add, but actively doing things that they felt kind of damaged the original's vibe or message.
Which leads into that paint by color comment they made, right?
Exactly. It felt to them like a studio product, like it was all just mapped out beforehand. No real heart, even if maybe someone tried to put some in.
Just checking boxes.
Pretty much. And that brought up this whole debate for them. Is it even fair to compare a remake directly to the original?
That's always the question, isn't it? What was their take?
They were firm. They said for a copy remake like this, one that's trying so hard to just be the original again, comparing it is absolutely fair game.
Okay, so they're distinguishing it from, say, an adaptation that really tries to do its own thing.
Right. An adaptation might change the setting or the tone, This one, they argued, calls itself a remake. It wants you to compare it.
It's not Lilo and Stitch? A reimagining or something?
Exactly. It's Lilo and Stitch, plain and simple. And they see this as a trend, too. They mentioned the upcoming How to Train Your Dragon live action is apparently going to be almost shot for shot as well.
Wow. So relying heavily on nostalgia, basically.
That was their feeling. Studios banking on built-in affection rather than, original ideas or truly fresh takes.
So fundamentally, they saw it as cynical and uninspired. A retread that missed the magic because it just copied instead of understanding.
Nailed it. And beyond that general feeling, they had some really specific gripes about how it copied things.
Okay, like what?
Well, just the sheer amount they felt was copied. Almost shot for shot. Wasn't just hyperbole for them. They meant literal lines of dialogue, specific gags, just lifted.
And that bothered them.
Yeah, especially with Stitch himself. They were kind of baffled that Disney brought back the original voice actor, Chris Sanders, to record new lines.
Why baffled? Isn't that usually seen as a good thing, getting the original voice?
Well, yeah, but their point was he sounds exactly the same, like identical to the 2002 performance.
Okay.
So their cynical take was, why pay him again? They literally could have just taken the audio from the original and saved some money.
Yeah. Okay, that is cynical, but I see their point. It feeds into that feeling of it being less a creative project and more just recycling assets.
Exactly. Ripping off their own movie was the phrase they used.
Wow.
And this all ties back to that idea that anything good was just borrowed.
Yeah.
You mentioned dialogue. They kept coming back to the swear joke.
I think you said Visa bit. Classic.
Right. They loved it in the original, said it landed perfectly. But in the remake, their verdict was clear. It wasn't as good.
Why not? Just because they'd heard it before?
Partly that, yeah. They argued the whole appeal relies on you having seen the original. Like,
Yeah.
if you hadn't seen the first one, the remake's trailer would leave you cold, completely disinterested. It doesn't stand on its own.
That makes sense. It's trading entirely on nostalgia.
And the other thing was, they felt comedy styles have just changed since 2002. What was funny then might need a different setup or delivery now. They literally said for the Visa joke, they could have done it a different way to make it land better in 2025.
Instead of just repeating it verbatim.
Yeah. Repeating it felt lazy to them and just less funny.
Okay, so the general vibe is lack of vision, lazy copying, and a failure to adapt the material effectively. Less homage, more like creative exhaustion.
That sums it up pretty well.
We'll get right back to the hot takes after a word from our sponsor.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. You've got an idea. How easy is it to actually build your online store with Shopify?
Well, that's clearly a major focus for them. Ease of entry. They have this online store editor, loads of themes you can customize. The idea is you don't need to be a web developer to get something professional looking online.
Right. No coding required.
And then there's the Shopify App Store. Think of it like building blocks. Need advanced email marketing? There's an app.
So you can kind of layer on functionality as you grow rather than needing everything up front.
Precisely. It lets you start lean and add tools as you actually need them.
And they handle some of the tricky bits too, don't they? Like getting your domain name, the web hosting.
Keeping all that integrated definitely smooths out the process.
But a store isn't much good if you can't sell from it, or if you want to sell in other places too.
Yeah, and that's where their whole sell everywhere concept comes in. It's not just about your .com anymore.
Right, so obviously your online store, but also physical stores.
Yep, with their point of sale system, so you can manage online and in-person sales together.
And social media.
Absolutely. Integrations for selling directly on social platforms, marketplaces, plus tools for international selling, even wholesale or B2B.
All managed from one place.
And they really emphasize their checkout.
The world-class checkout. Why is that so important?
Think about it. You do all this work to get someone interested, get them to add to cart. The last thing you want is a clunky, slow, or untrustworthy checkout page making them leave.
So connecting all those sales channels helps you reach more people, and a good checkout helps you actually convert them. And what about the physical side? Getting orders out the door.
Yeah, logistics. Shopify Shipping aims to simplify that. Integrated shipping labels, better rates, inventory management tools. Plus, they have automation tools like Shopify Flow, which can handle repetitive tasks, freeing up your time.
Automation is always good.
And they're embracing AI, too, with Shopify Magic.
AI. For what?
Things like generating product descriptions, suggesting email subject lines, basically using AI to help merchants work faster and smarter. From the moment you have an idea, through setting up, selling everywhere, marketing, managing operations, scaling up. They aim to provide the tools and support for each stage.
Ease of use at the start, but power and flexibility as you grow. Click the link in the description and get your first 3 months for $1 each. Welcome back. So before the break, we talked about the overall disappointment and the copying critiques. Now let's get into the characters, because this seemed to be a real sore spot for the reviewers.
Yeah, character changes can really make or break a remake, can't they? Where did they start?
Jumba and Pleakley. Big changes there, apparently. With Jumba, in the original, he starts as an antagonist, right? Created Stitch, trying to get him back. But he has an arc.
Right, he's not just evil, he grows, changes, becomes part of the ohana.
Exactly. But in the remake,
Yeah.
the reviewer said he's just totally the villain. Flat out. No arc, just bad guy.
Really? That seems like a fundamental shift. Did they think it worked?
Not at all. They argued the original story didn't need a main villain like that. It was about family, finding connections. They compared it to Encanto again. Making Jumba the big bad just felt weird and unnecessary to them.
Why weird specifically?
Well, partly his design in the remake.
Yeah.
They said it looked extremely non-threatening. Kind of hard to be the scary villain if you look not scary.
Good point. And the other reason...
The performance. Zach Galifianakis. They were brutal, said he'd phoned this performance in so horribly, called it bad, flat, just not it.
Wow, they didn't hold back?
Not even a little. They even mentioned hearing some story about his attitude towards voice acting, like he just doesn't care or get how to connect with animated characters.
Oof. Whether that story is true or not, it clearly reflects how they heard the performance. Lifeless.
Totally. And they missed the original Jimba's voice. That sort of Russian kind of accent they felt made the character. This one was just bland. Plus, his motivation, being a villain because he's bored, they found that super weak.
Boredom as a motivation for intergalactic evil. Yeah, a bit thin.
And this change felt even odder because they removed Gontu.
Oh, right. Gontu was the main muscle-chasing Stitch in the original, wasn't he?
Exactly. He filled that antagonist role perfectly. So taking him out and trying to make Jumba the villain instead, it just didn't make sense to them. Left a hole. They mentioned Jumba and Pleakley were funny together in the original because they were incompetent, not because they were pure evil working together.
Speaking of Pleakley, how did he fare?
Not well. The word they used was sad. And they actually said someone should have been fired over how Pleakley turned out.
No. Fired. That's strong. What was the issue?
A big one was the dress. You know, Pleakley famously wears a dress in the original.
Yeah, it's an iconic look.
Apparently, they heard Disney tried putting him in a dress for the remake, but then backed off or changed it somehow. Seemed hesitant.
Why hesitant?
Well, their interpretation, based on the buzz they heard, was fear. Fear of upsetting the trans community, maybe? Or being seen as making some kind of woke statement?
Yeah.
But he wore a dress in the original, like 20 years ago.
Exactly. That's why they found it ludicrous. It was already there, played for laughs. Why suddenly get scared about it now?
So this ties into that broader point they made
About the overly PC culture fear, yeah.
Yeah.
They felt like creators are getting so scared of offending the smallest common denominator that they're just afraid to do anything interesting or quirky anymore. They even made a crack about someone maybe being offended by Stitch's voice, just to illustrate the point.
Wow. So they felt Pleakley ended up watered down because of this fear.
Pretty much. Watered down, less interesting, and visually just off. They specifically didn't like the CGI for his eye. Just looked bad, apparently.
Okay, so Jumba and Pleakley were definite misses for them. What about the human characters? Nani.
Big changes there, too, and not for the better in their view. Original Nani, awesome. Young, sure, but mature, capable, handling an impossible situation.
Right, she had to grow up fast, yeah.
But remake Nani, they felt she came across as extremely immature, incapable, even stupid sometimes.
Ouch. Was there any explanation given in the movie?
They acknowledged the movie might imply her parents died more recently. Maybe she's younger, like 18 or 19, less experience.
But that didn't excuse it for them.
Nah, they still found her level of ineptitude pretty ridiculous. Like the whole health insurance thing being this massive hurdle. They were like, it's a phone call, the social worker could help, Medicaid exists. It felt forced.
So it didn't ring true compared to the original Nani.
Not at all. They remembered original Nani as very capable, a real parental figure, even while she was struggling. They used the job loss scene as an example. Original Nani shields Lilo, makes jokes. Remake Nani gets mad at Lilo, which they felt made her seem, well, their word was, kind of a bitch.
Wow, so the core feeling was.
That remake Nani is actually not cut out for this, which, as they pointed out, completely flies in the face of the ohana point. If the person meant to hold the family together seems incapable, what does that say about the theme?
Point? What about David, Nani's friend?
Almost disappeared, apparently. Original David was actively helping, a real good dude, a support system.
Yeah.
Remake David, they described him as furniture. Just there, not doing anything useful.
Another character seemingly diminished.
Yeah.
Okay, Lilo herself, the star.
Issues there, too. They felt the remake really dropped the ball on exploring her trauma. Remember the Pudge, the fish line, Pudge controls the weather?
Yeah, such a weird, iconic line.
In the original, they argued, it reveals so much about Lilo. Her guilt, her way of processing grief, maybe thinking she caused her parents' accident by not feeding the fish. It grounds her weirdness.
Okay, and the remake.
The line is there, but according to them, they don't do anything else with it. So remake Lilo is just weird because no context, no depth. The original explained why she was strange and it mattered to the story. Here, it's just a quirk. That's a subtle but important difference.
And then there was the fight with Myrtle. That changed quite a bit too.
Drastically, apparently. Original. Stitch snaps a picture. Lilo kind of bops Myrtle. It's played as a cute, funny gag. Cartoon violence.
Right, kids being kids.
Remake. Lilo straight up assaults her, pushes her off a 4-foot stage.
Whoa! That's not the same thing at all.
Not even close. They pointed out, depending how she landed, that could end very badly. And there were witnesses. It wasn't funny anymore. It was genuinely concerning behavior. They felt adults watching that would react totally differently than they did to the original cartoon fight.
Yeah, you called child services for that, maybe. Okay, any other casting notes? General quality?
Overall, they called the casting bad. Said nobody really jumped off the screen. which they suggested might actually be the director's fault if no one stands out.
Anyone specific singled out besides Galifianakis?
The actor playing Cobra Bubbles, they felt he was about 30 years too old and just not convincing as this imposing figure.
Anyone they did like?
Jason Scott Lee, he was in the original, briefly played a new character here. They said he delivered some of the best acting in the movie, even though he was only in it for like 4 minutes.
Huh, interesting.
And they threw in a little trivia bit, too, a fun Easter egg. Apparently, Jason Scott Lee and an actor playing Pleakley's human disguise both have connections to Bruce Lee movies.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Jason Scott Lee played Bruce Lee in Dragon, and the other guy was in some less famous film about a Bruce Lee fight, and also played Rapunzel's prince in Into the Woods. Just a fun aside.
Okay, so mostly negative on the character front. Changes that weaken the originals, performances that fell flat, and some odd casting choices.
That seems to be the consensus from their discussion, yeah. It sounds like the characters were a major part of why it didn't work for them.
All right, let's shift from characters to the actual plot and logic. The reviewers seemed pretty frustrated here, too, calling some moments literally infuriating.
Yeah, that's putting it mildly. Their main structural issue was something they called the and then problem.
Okay, and then, what does that mean exactly?
They contrasted it with good storytelling, which they said works on because and/or therefore. Things happen for a reason, leading logically to the next thing.
Right, like in the original, Stitch needs to hide because he's being chased. Therefore, he goes to the shelter because he sees the poster. Therefore, he pretends to be a dog so that Lilo will adopt him. It all connects.
Exactly. Each step is motivated. But they felt the remake was full of, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. But the why felt missing. It was just hitting plot beats from the original without the connective tissue. They think this is killing modern movies.
Making them feel disjointed, yeah.
Totally. And beyond that structure, they pointed out moments that just defied, like basic common sense or physics.
Like what? What was infuriating?
Characters doing things no person of sound mind would do just to move the plot along, ignoring how drowning works, apparently. And there was a scene where someone's supposedly walking on the ocean floor weighed down by Stitch, like way out from shore. They found that physically baffling.
Little things that just pull you out of the movie.
Big things, in their view. And the whole social worker plotline really got under their skin.
With Nani needing health insurance.
Yeah. They thought the social worker handled it terribly, making things harder, not helping. And the idea that Nani giving up Lilo would magically fix her hospital bills, they were like, that's not how this works. It felt like a fake dilemma forced onto the plot, a plot device that doesn't make real-world sense.
Right. And then there was the portal gun.
Portal gun in Lilo and Stitch, where did that come from?
Exactly.
Huh.
Apparently, Nani wants to study marine biology in San Diego.
San Diego. Why not? Hawaii?
Their exact words were, "You're in fucking Hawaii, bitch." Like, the perfect place for marine biology.
Huh. Okay, so why the move and the portal gun?
They speculated it was an out for Nani, a way for the movie to let her leave Lilo but still visit easily, maybe dodging criticism about her struggling so much in the original.
But portal gun changes everything, doesn't it?
Completely breaks the logic. If she can portal anywhere, why leave Lilo at all? Why not portal to class from home? Why get a dorm? They even said, hey, if you have a portal gun, start a delivery service, make money, problem solved. Yeah, it sounds like it creates more problems than it solves, narratively speaking.
Totally. And there were smaller scene-level things, too, like Lilo being told to change for the hula performance, and then, bam, she's instantly in costume, no transition. You're like, when did this happen?
Sloppy editing or something.
Seems like it. And the ending with Cobra Bubbles apparently living with Nani and Lilo, they found that really weird and maybe even inappropriate for a government agent. What's he doing there?
Yeah, that raises questions.
The fight between Nani and Lilo also felt weak to them, a cheap imitation of the original's raw emotion.
And then the defibrillator scene. That sounded like a real low point for them.
Oh boy, yeah. They tore that apart. First, that's not how defibs work. They don't restart breathing. Second, how does David even get one? It's not equipment you can just get.
Right, it's specialized medical gear.
And then clipping car jumper cables to Stitch? Why? They felt it looked like torture. And electricity hurts Stitch in this universe, doesn't it? It doesn't help him. They called it a choice that they made that was just baffling.
Was there anything redeemable about that scene?
Apparently, the sound effect when Stitch reacts, they said it was a very accurate sound effect of a dog throwing up. And as dog owners, they found that specific sound hilarious.
So the barfing sound was the highlight of the scene.
Pretty much the only highlight of a scene they found illogical, scientifically wrong, and just bad.
Okay, so plot holes, logic gaps, baffling choices. It sounds like the script itself had some major issues according to these reviewers.
Yeah, definitely. And they didn't just see these as isolated problems with this one movie. They connected a lot of this back to bigger trends they're seeing in Hollywood.
Okay, broaden it out for us. What were those connections?
One big one was just the difficulty of getting real emotion across when you go from animation to live action.
How so?
Well, they pointed out that so much communication is nonverbal, right? Especially in the eyes. Animation can really exaggerate that big expressive eyes for heroes, smaller ones for villains. They mentioned the Goofy movie as an example of animation conveying huge emotion through eyes alone.
And live action can't quite capture that same level of expressiveness.
Not in the same way, they argued. Even good actors trying to convey that much emotion might come off as hamming it up, or if they play it subtle, it can feel emotionless and heartless. They pointed to the live-action Lion King as feeling emotionally flat because the realistic animals couldn't emote like the cartoon ones.
Interesting. Stitch is still animated in the remake, though, right?
Yeah.
Did he escape this?
Sort of, yeah. But they felt his design was just a slightly more realistic and textured-looking version of the original. So better than a real animal trying to act, but not really innovative either.
Okay, what else? What other industry trends did they connect this to?
A big one was this perceived fear of sincerity in modern American films.
Fear of sincerity, meaning
Meaning filmmakers seem scared to just let an emotional moment land. They feel the need to constantly undercut tension or drama with a joke. They basically blamed Marvel, saying, ever since Marvel came along and now there's a formula.
the Marvel quippiness invading everything.
Exactly. It doesn't let emotions sit still, which they argued is why people go to movies for those feelings. They held up Godzilla -1 as a counterexample, praising it for not being afraid to be sincere. It even made them wary of the new Superman movie.
Because of the director's style.
Yeah, known for humor. They worry it'll undercut the drama.
What about the technical side? CGI and effects.
Huge issue for them, especially comparing it to Godzilla -1. They couldn't understand how Pleakley looked so bad in a $100 million movie, while Godzilla looked amazing and won an Oscar on a $15 million budget. Their question was blunt. Why did Lilo and Jumbo look terrible?
Did they have theories? Why? Better tech overseas? Different priorities?
They threw out a few ideas. Maybe Godzilla's in-house VFX team, more creativity, using practical stuff combined with CGI, motion capture. They also had a theory that Hollywood makes movies too damn dark, specifically to hide bad CGI.
Huh?
Easier to get away with it when you can't see clearly.
That's a cynical take, but
Yeah.
maybe plausible sometimes.
Yeah. Another trend they hated was redesigning things that worked fine before.
Like what?
They used Star Trek as the prime example, Klingons, other aliens. Their look changes constantly, even within the same timeline. They were like, why do we always need to change things that work? If the original design was good, why mess with it? They did admit keeping Stitch mostly the same was one thing the remake got right, though.
Okay. And the PC culture thing came up again in this wider context.
Yeah, briefly. Just reinforcing their idea that fear of offending makes creators too timid. They did mention the Hawaiian representation, saying they thought it was fairly good, but acknowledged others might disagree. Their attitude was kind of, sometimes the beauty is in the attempt, suggesting trying is better than being too scared to engage.
So it sounds like they used Lilo and Stitch as a case study for a lot of their current frustrations with mainstream movies.
Pretty much. They dropped names of other movies here and there, Snow White being worse, Cinderella maybe being okay, and Kanto as a positive comparison, but mostly to illustrate these broader points about sincerity, visual effects, and creative choices.
So it wasn't just a bad movie in isolation for them. It was symptomatic of larger issues.
That was definitely the feeling. And all these issues, the character changes, the logic flaws, the industry trends, they all fed into what the reviewers saw as the remake's biggest failure, undermining the core theme, ohana.
Right. Ohana means family. Family means nobody gets left behind or forgotten. That's the heart of the original.
Absolutely. And they argued that for Nani in the original, taking care of Lilo wasn't just a choice, it was a duty. Deeply ingrained because of ohana, she embraced it even though it was incredibly hard. That struggle was the point.
But the remake gave her an out.
That's how they saw it. She gets this chance to leave, supposedly because of hospital bills, which they already said doesn't make sense logically, and she takes it.
And the portal gun reinforces that.
Yeah, the portal gun felt like a cheat to them. It softens the blow of her leaving, makes her struggle seem less significant, maybe tries to avoid the audience feeling she's abandoning Lilo, but it undermines the sacrifice inherent in the original's ohana message.
So they felt the story should have made her stick it out, uphold the ideal.
Pretty much. They argued that stories conveying ideals need characters who embody them, even when it's tough. They used a religious analogy, like Jesus in the garden, the power is in facing the hardship, not getting an easy escape. Giving Nani these outs felt like the movie itself was being, well, selfish was their word. Like it was subconsciously trying to tell you not to take the concept ohana so seriously.
Wow, that's a deep critique.
It is. And they brought David back here, too. Original David was trying to help Nani, showing support was possible. Remake David being useless makes remake Nani's decision to leave seem more justified, maybe, but it weakens the overall message about community and support that ohana implies.
So for them, the very soul of the movie, the ohana theme, was compromised.
That was the ultimate failure in their eyes. It lost its heart.
Okay, so after breaking down all those criticisms, characters, plot, themes, industry stuff, what was the final grade? The overall assessment?
Pretty low. They settled on a C minus, maybe even a D. Not quite an F like they apparently gave the Snow White remake, but definitely a redo the assignment kind of grade.
Did they feel any effort went into it?
Not really. They felt it lacked soul, was lazy, just kind of exists. Their prediction was it will be forgotten very quickly.
So their recommendation?
Skip it. Just watch the original movie. And they actually recommended the animated TV series, too. Called it really good.
What about Stitch? Didn't they like him?
He was the only consistently good part, but even then they called him a rehash. Same design, same voice actor. Nothing new there, even for the one element that worked.
Do they think it'll still make money?
Probably, yeah. Their theory was parents take kids, kids like Stitch, parents then subscribe to Disney Plus to watch the original. So it serves a commercial purpose for Disney, even if it's not a good film.
But how did it leave them feeling?
Just flat, all right, I saw it.
Yeah.
No excitement, no lasting impression. They specifically mentioned nobody in their theater was laughing, which is pretty damning for a movie with comedic aspirations.
What was their final, one-word summary?
They offered a few variations on A, like A, with a side of A, or just, all right, cool, extremely faint praise.
So, better than Snow White in their book, but only because it wasn't actively offensive?
Pretty much. Snow White apparently actively spit in the face of the first one. Lilo and Stitch just had a questionable take and was mostly just lazy. High bar, huh?
Yeah, sounds like damning with faint praise, comparing it to something they hated even more. So, ultimately, a forgettable, uninspired movie that missed the magic of the original.
That's the clear takeaway from their review, yeah.
Okay, so as we wrap up this look at the part of Your Broadway World podcast take on the Lilo and Stitch remake, we've covered a lot of ground. There are criticisms about the characters, the plot holes, the weird logic, the broader industry issues they connected it to, and especially how they felt it failed, the core ohana theme.
Yeah, their perspective was definitely that the remake just fundamentally misunderstood or ignored what made the original resonate so strongly.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it, about these live-action remakes in general. Is it just really hard to capture that animated magic in live action? Or is it something else? Like that fear of sincerity they talked about, or relying too much on a formula. Are studios losing touch with what made these stories work in the first place?
Or maybe it's simpler. Maybe making a truly great movie is just incredibly difficult. And using a known, beloved story feels like a safer bet financially, even if the result isn't artistically successful. The track record for a lot of these remakes isn't exactly stellar, is it? It makes you think about that tension between nostalgia, creativity, and just, business.
Right. How do you update something for today, appeal to maybe a new audience, but still keep the heart, the core values that made people love it originally? It's a tricky balance. And according to these reviewers, Lilo and Stitch didn't just wobble on that tightrope, it fell off completely.
Definitely something to chew on. Thanks for joining us for this analysis today. Hopefully it gives you some food for thought next time you hear about another animated classic getting the live-action treatment.
Hi, this is Bill Farmer, the voice of Goofy and other characters. You got to watch the Part of Your Broadway World podcast right here. It's going to be fun.